If this is too loud, let me know. I'll take it off. Okay. Before I begin, my president told me that it's a good idea to do pleasantries at in-person finals. So, yay pleasantries. Okay. I've not been in an in-person finals before, would not know. Okay. I want to thank my debate team, first and foremost, everyone who is here and everyone who is not here for supporting me. The past year that I've been doing VP has been very, very fun, and this has been a very exciting thing to do. And like to be able to yap for 7 minutes now, amazing. I also would like to thank my family. I really want to thank my family for like supporting me for doing debate, because I think historically, you know, coming from like an Asian country, a lot of times women are discouraged from doing debate, and I'm very grateful for having a family who like really pushed me and supported me to keep doing what I like and to keep doing it even in college when like they're paying absurd amounts of tuition. Okay. OJ's case is incredibly simple. For House Representatives who are seeking re-election, opposing Trump now is the best way to secure this. Couple things from OJ. First, characterization of your average House Republican and what is in their interest. I think for the average House Republican or politicians in general, you want to seek the ability to be to continue existing in office, i.e. you care about a career that you can continue sustaining. For House Republicans, this means the midterm elections in 2 years. That is the next election cycle, when there's specifically very much a lot of pressure on them, because historically incumbent parties, people like right now, like the Republican Party, normally loses the midterm election because within the 2 years from the big election, like the presidential election year to like the midterm election, they oftentimes do pretty shitty things. So like they're more likely to lose their election, which is why there's pressure for them to do well on the midterm election. That is why their primary interest is not just to secure their ability to exist in office, but the continued ability to exist in that office. That is why they care most about re-election. And the second thing they care about is not just being in the office and just being like yippee-ki-yay. They want to actually be able to use the power that they have to enact and pass policies. I think this is really sensible, because I think people who are actually engaging in office and running for office and spending all this time and effort are people who are like ideologically motivated. They have ideas that they want to implement, and also to some degree and extent care about either money or people, which either way requires them to have the ability to affect change on the economy or on the people in general, which means that they want the ability to actually do something so that they can protect either their self-interest or the interests of their constituents. Then, second burden, why is Trump like stealing the power of the purse just bad in terms of the interest of House Republicans? This is because this is one of Trump's most unpopular policies that he has passed so far. This is because it has the most direct and immediate impact on people directly, i.e. this is the one that lets people like they're losing jobs. The fact that research funds are cut, meaning that people don't get access, like people are getting fired from their positions because there's no longer a fund for them to do research, or the fact that they're literally losing access to their social security fund immediately because Trump has said, boo, no more of this. I think this is really bad, because I don't think Trump cares about whether he's popular or not. Most likely he's not going to be reelected because he's a lame duck president. He's already run for second term, meaning that in the next 4 years, all he really truly cares about is pandering to himself and to his rich white old allies. Why does this mean? This is because Trump believes that if he panders to like the rich old white guys, i.e. billionaires like Elon Musk, it is much more likely that when he gets out of office, he is more likely to be supported by these billionaire funds that exist outside of the ability of the government. Also, if you benefit billionaires and also people who are extremely rich, that also just benefits Trump as an individual, as someone who is like rich in society. That means that Trump does not give a fuck about what the rest of the American public want and only cares about these allies. Why is that bad? We think that just like the mechanisms above, cutting funds have been extremely bad for Americans and bad for the constituents of House Republicans, because Americans in general, and specifically people who are working class Americans who generally who vote for Republicans, just to not like tend to rely a lot on things like welfare, like aid and medical research that produce like rare drugs to like make sure people don't die from like diseases. I think all of these things mean that it's fundamentally really bad for its constituents, because right now these it's not going very well. It's two implications. First, Republicans cannot do policy or like actually affect change when Trump is doing this. This is for two reasons. A, it is currently unstable. They don't know when the funding for something, that the policy that they pass will actually be pulled away from Trump because Trump is having a bad day in office. Second, because they don't actually have the money authority, really the power over the purse anymore, because you don't know when Trump is just going to get JK, haha, you don't actually get the ability to do this anymore, meaning that fundamentally any policies that the House Republicans want to try to pass aren't actually able to be passed in the status quo. But second, the second implication is that it's extremely unpopular for House Republicans to be associated with Trump policies, i.e., if House Republicans sit in the House as a majority and do not do anything to respond to Trump's cutting of dealing with the fund, a cutting fund, they are viewed as complicit. Why is that? Two reasons. First, Democrats and news media will talk about it as why are not the people checking back on Trump? We think that it's incredibly bad, especially liberal media, for in liberal media, they're going to be framing this as an issue of the Republican Party in general, and specifically House Republicans who this policy specifically affects directly their ability to do their job. And second, it's a lot of people are going to look around and be like, hey, why is the government program that's supporting my life no longer able to work anymore? Why is no one trying to stop Trump in the first place? I think those are the questions that constituents raise, and also are encouraged by the media to be raised questions about why no one is doing anything to stop Trump. That is why in our world, it's very simple. When House Republicans stand up, they are seen as much more moderate. They are seen as trying to protect their constitution. They are seen as trying to protect their democracy, which panders and appeals to much more broadly to Americans that end up voting at midterms. Why? Why would they do this? And I think this argument is independent of whether House Republicans are successful or have the capacity to actually overturn Trump's policies. This is really important because it's about a perception. I.e., to win re-election, they need to pander to the people who specifically show up to midterm elections. We want to know these are generally different people from the people who vote in the presidential election. Well, statistically, these are people who are older. They're much more financially stable. They have the time to sort of follow up on politics and the time to take it out of their day to vote. And second, this is specifically uniquely different from Trump's majority voter base, i.e., MAGA voters. This is because specifically the people who voted for Trump were overwhelmingly undereducated in rural areas, and sometimes tends to be people who were almost undereducated in rural areas and white men. So I think the reason why there's a delineation here is then the people who show up to midterms not necessarily are people who are able to get mobilized by Trump. I want to preempt arguments about Trump is going to be able to bully House Republicans and they're going to be very sad and that's not in their interest to go against the president. I think the reason is Trump is not able to mobilize his voters to vote for an election where he is not there. He has developed a cult-like following of people who only show up because Trump is their Jesus. And I think that's a really important point because that means that Trump doesn't have the capacity to actually enable a lot of voters to vote against these House Republicans. Also, it works against it if the House is no longer Republican and the opposition is a liberal Democrat or an extreme Republican who ends up being worse for the Republican image. And overall, I think that's terrible for Trump, and I think that's not in his incentive to bully them. Then, why is this important? Because I think that then this means that it's more likely that House Republicans are going to be reelected if, first of all, they pander to the people who show up, but also are considered more moderate than the people who are extremely pro-Trump and also are able to capture a bit more Democratic audiences. Second, they care about policies and they're actually able to pass policies because now their ability to do power of the purse is not taken. Why is it that these politicians care about policies? First of all, it's what you were elected to do. Second, it allows you to direct resources to a district, i.e. federal grants and subsidies, which helps you get reelected. And third, it's why does standing up help to achieve this? I think specifically, one, the Supreme Court decided the issue, which means that there's also a likelihood that they are correct, and the Supreme Court won't reverse Trump's decision, in which case House Republicans get also a perceptual boost in popularity because they're yeah, the Supreme Court said constitutionality, yay me. But second, it's also because they are loyal to the traditions of institutions like the Federalist Society. And lastly, if House representatives Republicans oppose it, they will be more likely to stand up in general, overall, in the government to check back against a lot of Trump's abuses of power in overall society. Thus, OG case is extremely simple, right? House Republicans care about re-election. The best way to get re-elected is to pander to the public perception of what people want, and people dislike Trump's policies. That is the arc of OG case. Very proud to propose.
The Prime Minister for a speech, but any further ado, we are about to speak.
So I have to wear this.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can just clip it, or if you want, you can hold it as well. It's up to you.
Everyone is ready. And we'll start my speech. okay, OG tells you that House Republicans care about being reelected and that people dislike Trump's policies, and their entire case relies on this, right? But I think that the people who are voting for these people anyway, maybe even if they're different from the people who are voting for Trump, I think that they largely align with the Republican Party, right? I think what is the alternative then? I think the alternative then is Democratic, right? I think that they don't align with the Democratic Party. And so I think here there's a wash because the only alternative is going to the Democratic Party, right? And so I think that the people who are voting for these House Republicans are on large going to be the same people who are sort of voting for Trump and sort of aligning with like Republican values then, right? I think that the alternative there is going to go to the Democratic Party. I don't think that they're going to find much solace there, right? I think we hear a lot of the harms coming from OG and what's likely to happen, right? If we openly oppose Trump's attempts, right? And we agree that these are very, very detrimental harms, right? But what I'm going to tell you is why you're not likely to stop Trump on both sides of the House, and why it's actually better for the House Republicans to not oppose Trump's attempt in terms of like their own political capital in the future, right? I think that we should largely look at like the Trump supporter base, right? I think that they try to really they're uncharitable in saying that these just aren't the people voting for Trump, and that these are just like largely different bases of people, right? I think that a lot of these people, there's a lot of overlap, and it's generally like people who, align with Republican values. But specifically, I think that Trump has fundamentally transformed the Republican Party, right? I think the people who are voting for Trump aren't voting for the Republican Party anymore. They're voting for Trump, and they're voting for Trumpism. It's not Republican anymore, right? I think that Trump is largely able to achieve this because of his populist sentiments, right? I think that the way he was elected and the way he was able to garner so much support, even after his detrimentous first term, is the way that he interacts with his voters, right? He tells them, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, they've both been able to pursue the things that matter to you throughout history, right? Or in the past few decades. I think that he tells you, I see you, I feel you, and I recognize you, right? He relies on this populistic sentiment to garner the majority of his supporters. I think that's really problematic because, we even saw, the January 6th, insurrection. He sort of largely transformed the Republican Party. And a lot of these are people who you could consider normal Republicans who then turned into Trumpism. I think that the key point here that I'm trying to say is that he's largely transformed the Republican Party, or what are supposed to be Republican values, right? But then what is the alternative? People just turn to the Democratic Party. I tell you, they're not going to find solace there, right? And even when we see at the January 6th insurrection, I tell you, right? What happened when people started opposing, people that went against, people in the Republican Party that went against Trump? Take Pence, for example, when he didn't support the January 6th insurrection the way that Trump wanted it to pan out. I think that a lot of people further just badgered Pence, right? Pence. I think that they sort of said, you don't align with our president or the people, the person that we put in office. And so I think that they largely just distanced themselves from him. And I think that we saw this for a lot of people in Congress too. People just because he fundamentally changed the way that people view or the landscape of the Republican Party. I think anyone who opposes Trump is largely just left out of this space, right? I think what is the problem then for House Republicans when they do this? I think they further lose control of the Republican Party, right? I think that we're at a critical inflection point of the Republican Party where they're distancing themselves what are supposed to be Republican values, right? I think that because I tell you that you fundamentally changed the Republican Party, Trump, he's foreign in and out, right? He can't be reelected, right? I think that House Republicans need to see the effects of after a Trump presidency, right? Where we're not likely to have, I'll take you at 5, and we're not going to have sort of Trump in office. I think that they don't want to lose control of the Republican Party for a few reasons. They tell you that Republicans care about being elected and that they care about policy, right? They do not want to lose their supporter base. They don't want to lose the people who are going to put them in office in the future when they're sort of openly opposing Trump. I think that's going to be really problematic. So insofar as you are unsuccessful at stopping Trump, the only thing that that you're doing is you're signaling that you're opposed to Trump and that you're opposed to his policies. I don't think that you're enacting any meaningful change. I think that you're just signaling that you're opposed to this. I think that the way it's going to be perceived, with like the Republican base or Trump supporters is going to be really problematic. I'll take those.
Yeah, who exactly gains control of the Republican Party if not elected Republican officials?
Yeah, I tell you that the people that gain control of the Republican Party are yes, they're Republicans, but they're not Trumpists, right? I think that they're people who sort of align with the Republican Party because of its like founding values, right? And they're like Republican. A lot of Republicans actually have gone out and spoken against Trump, right? I think even within like Republicans, a lot of them don't align with his values. So we just like retake control of what is like the normal Republican Party. So I tell you that insofar as you cannot stop Trump, and the burden for them is to prove that you are able to stop Trump. I tell you that he has no incentive to stop sort of the things that he's doing because he's not going to be reelected. I think that there's no incentive for him to do there. We've already we've seen that he's like motivated by his like personal ideological beliefs, his personal gains, sort of the money that the cash that's in his pocket, right? And so I think that insofar as you're not able to prove that they're going to stop Trump, the Republicans just lose the control of the Republican Party. Yes, we understand OG when they say that like they care about making policy and they care about remaining in power. I think that that's just not going to be. They're just going to struggle with this sort of. They're going to struggle with this. In the future when they've lost control of the Republican Party. I think that like people are still going to be voting Republican, but they're just going to face, a lot of opposition to even get any work done. I think that like constituents, I think on our side are going to be complaining a lot more. What are the impacts here? I think that what's key in this debate is the way that Trump has fundamentally changed the Republican Party, right? I think that this is Trumpism and his populistic, like nationalistic sentiments, like align with people's values. I think that like he's fundamentally changed it here, right? And so I think that if House Republicans are to enact the policies that they tell you they so deeply care about, I think that they need to make sure that they are not entirely losing the credibility and the legitimacy that these people attribute to them. So proud to oppose that proposal.
Legal of opposition, there's one full seats to voting for their agreed that it's time.
I think it's good. Getting to it. Okay, I think that works. I want to say a huge thank you to Stella for debating with me at this tournament. You have been one of the best partners I could have asked for, and you're also teaching me how to give PMs, which I think my record shows is a skill that I sorely need to improve upon. Hopefully this deputy will be much better. Also, thank you so much to everyone at SDS for giving me the ability to do these debate tournaments, and particularly to my coaches, Asher and Enting, who have taught me so much about debate, and about Tejas, who puts up with arguing with me about utilitarianism for like hours on end, and makes me better at debate in the process. All right, with that out of the way, let's talk about politics. OO has a really simple case on this round. They say that if you oppose Trump, Trump is going to punish you for doing this, the MAGA base is going to punish you for doing this, and then you're going to lose an election. I'm going to explain in excruciating detail why this is not true, and in fact, why Stella is absolutely right that the correct political move, both in terms of your policymaking interests and in terms of your electoral interests, is to oppose Trump on this. So the first question, is Trump able to effectively bully these people? And what you get out of OO is them saying that the Republican Party is effectively a personalistic party completely controlled by Trump. I think this is just a really uncharitable interpretation of the status quo that is ignorant of basic facts. I think when you look at the most effective like Trump ad in the election, it's about like Kamala Harris giving like surgeries to trans immigrants and stuff like that. Like people are voting in this election first on like anti-woke politics, like this backlash by like young men who like don't like being told that they have male privilege. I also think that people largely voted on being mad about inflation. In fact, Trump is not like unique that he won. In fact, almost every incumbent party lost because people just fucking hate it when the price of eggs go up. It is not that the American people is in love with Trump. It is that the American people doesn't like paying lots of money for gas. And sure, Trump won the Republican primary in 2020, but I think there were like super legitimate challengers with a ton of money behind them, which is like relatively unusual for a former president. So it's just simply, Trump does not have as much power as you think he does. What does Stella tell you? She tells you that Trump's base does not actually show up when Democrats are not on the ballot. What's important to understand is that this is a result of the demographics of Trump's base in 2020. He is increasingly winning disaffected young men. You know who doesn't vote in like midterm elections? Disaffected young men. He's increasingly also winning like minority voters that turn out at lower rates. But importantly, and in 2024, he won people making less than $50,000 per year for the first time for a Republican. These people are not reliable voters. They vote in presidential elections when Trump himself, the guy that they care about, is on the ballot. When it's just some random Republican representative, these people do not turn out at high rates. So sure, Trump can rile up his base, he can posture, he can attack, but at the point at which these people literally aren't voting in the elections that matter, he is unable to actually issue a real threat. Who does vote in midterm elections? I think it's like older people. I think it's people who have like higher incomes. And these people are actually probably likely pretty mad about the government policy because they're like super scared that they're not going to get like their social security check in the mail because of something that Trump does. The other thing I'd like to say is that if House Republicans do this, I want to be very clear that they are going to do it as a unit. Sure, when one or two representatives break rank on the MAGA agenda, he can like donate $1 million and endorse their primary opponent, but I don't think he can literally do this for every single member of the House Republican Party. First, I think this is just in the motion. It's about what's good for House Republicans writ large, not what's good for like individual ones. But second, they know that they are vulnerable on their own, so they're obviously going to communicate among themselves and plan their messaging before they do this and emphasize how it does fight for the MAGA ideal, how it gives them the power to rein in government spending in ways that actually make sense. If all House Republicans do this, Trump probably won't actually endorse their opponents or make this a big fight at all. Why is this? It's because Trump, if nothing else, hates more than anything to lose. This is why he denied the results of the election, is because he's unable to like chalk up any kind of a loss. What this means is that if he thinks his endorsements aren't going to work because he can't literally kick out every single popular House Republican incumbent in an election, he's not going to make that a fight that he knows he's going to lose because doing so would greatly diminish his power. Okay, so what kind of House Republicans are actually at risk in the midterm election? First, I'd like to say that the general House Republicans are very worried about their at-risk members because it's way more fun in the House to be in the majority because you get to actually pass and affect policy. So they want to make sure they maintain their majority in the midterm elections. So they care about how these vulnerable members perform. But the vulnerable members are in really close, really moderate districts where the voter that swings an election one way or another is not a solid MAGA Republican. It is like your average Joe who just wants the government to like fucking work a little bit. I think these people in risky seats are really, really harmed when these unpopular policies go through and their representative does absolutely nothing about it. Furthermore, I think that he's really unlikely to be able to, just to be clear, he can't actually cause them to lose the general election because these are tipped by like these like moderate voters, but he also can't get these people primary, which is I think a lot of what we're going to get out of the rest of opposition. But the problem is incumbent politicians have ridiculously large advantages in primaries. Why is this? It's because congressional offices engage in large amounts of constituent services. I'm going to give you 4 reasons on this, but before that, I'll take closing. I think the people that vote in primaries are like mostly average Republicans, but like I already told you, they're high income, they are older voters. These are not the MAGA base of disaffected young men. These are the old guard of the Republican Party that are much more aligned with House representatives. Okay, why do incumbents have insane advantages in primary elections? I just like to characterize, we've heard a lot of things about primarying in the news and how powerful it is, but it's primarying for contested seats where there is not an incumbent. That is where primaries are so powerful. Okay, 4 reasons. One, they respond to constituent letters. I think this means a lot to people. The average person feels that the government is unresponsive, but when they get a personal letter from their member of Congress, that makes a huge difference because they actually feel heard. Two, they help people resolve conflicts with governmental agencies, i.e. if you're not getting your passport on time or your social security benefits got cut for some stupid accounting error, their office literally goes to fight for you because those people understand how the government works, they have influence with these agencies, and they know lots of people who work in the government, so they're often relatively successful. They get you back your social security check, they get you your passport on time. This matters more to most people than any ideological consideration in elections. If you personally got your social security check because of your representative going to fight for you, I think you probably vote for them. Most people are not crazy ideologues. You all just think that because we're a bunch of terminally online people who are into debate. Most people care about like actual kitchen table issues, and nothing is more kitchen table issues than constituent services where your person helps you directly. Three, they do town halls. Again, same warranting on seeing their representative in person and making people feel heard. I think most representatives are pretty charismatic, they're good at this, and they make constituents feel heard and supported. Fourth, I think they fight specifically for earmarks to help their constituents. I think in 2016, the House established a system where their representatives could request a certain amount of funds specifically for their district, and this was broadly approved of. This program is super popular among representatives because it's something super clear that you can deliver for your constituents and say, yes, I did something for you. I fixed that road. I saved that business. I helped repair the VA hospital. These are exactly the funds that Trump impounds because they're the random little expenditures by the government that the Elon stupid Doge thing is going to find and say, why are we funding a random hospital in Washougal, Washington? Again, I think most voters care about kitchen table issues. When you literally fix their pothole and then can go and say, look at this earmark, I fought for this, I got money for you, I fixed your pothole, they support that. If you want to know why 96% of House members are re-elected every time, this is why. They serve their constituents, they have a large platform to do so, this insulates from them for this. What does this mean? When they stand up, they're successful, they win moderate voters who are the actual threat to them in elections, and they're able to actually affect policy. So proud to propose.
First speech about any further review, yellow.
Yes. Is it good? Okay. I'm also here to do this. Thank everyone. Thank you so much. Ready? I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think what opening government has framed out for you is a risk of re-election. What does this look like? This looks like that it isn't them losing their district or losing the primaries. This looks like House Republicans losing to House Democrats at the midterm coming up. Why is this the case? I think this is very intuitive. When you see like the back and forth within politics, when bad shit has happened, you blame sort of the individuals that are like within the House or within the political body, and as such, it turns the votes within the mid-semester. Why do we think we actually better access the benefits of midterm elections themselves? I think they tell you a lot about why you're likely going to gain voters just because of the small issues that you're bringing solvency to. However, we think the larger signaling is that the Republican Party has been unable to deal with the issues that they are having and are generating more issues for the nation. What does this look like? This looks like exactly what they're telling you, like the rise in egg prices, people unable to get jobs, etc. Why do we bring better solvency on our side of the House? I think when you have, why do we bring better re-election results on our side of the House? Because when you have already existed this fundamental disagreement, this fundamental dissatisfaction with the status quo, the last thing you want to see is that your Senate and your president are at odds with each other. I.e., when you say that you oppose the president, what you are directly signaling to your constituents is that we don't back the decisions that you made during the last election. We are saying that what he is doing is completely wrong, and we are able to change that. Given this, I think it is likely that you're going to lose a share of your voter base, i.e., like they tell you that you're not going to lose a large margin of like MAGA voters because they don't vote in the primaries anyways. However, when you adopt a like pro-Trump like mindset, when Trump is able to then rally behind you as the Senate, like endorsing the policies and the actions that he is taking on, you're better able to like access that marginal amount of voters that Trump is able to bring. Why is this necessarily the case? I think when Trump is like, why is this necessarily the case? I think when Trump is like utilizing his essential cult of personality to recruit voters in, they're able to still vote for him against the Democratic House, which he is refusing to lose against, i.e. he's able to campaign better for these individuals insofar as they support them. However, if they don't support them and they are directly in opposition, I think, sure, you do gain a marginal amounts of like old Republican voters. However, those voters are the people who would have voted for you likely in this election anyways. I think the incentive is very clear. When you oppose Trump, you push away the people who strongly support Trump, the people who described by my partner as those following under Trumpism. However, you are unable to like regain better your original voter base because your original voter base was originally going to vote for you anyways. This then heavily mitigates the delta on their side of the house. So then why do we think this likely actually brings better solvency? Let's go into the case that Angel brings out for you. So Trump voters are voting for Trumpism, and we see this as like a divide within the Republican Party concurrently, that you have people voting for the historical values, and then you have individuals who are voting under this like new fan of cult of personality under Trump. Why is it critically necessary that we resolve this divide? Because after Trump is out of office, after the 4-year span, you're going to be at losing that portion of voter base. I.e. the individuals in Congress who want, in Senate, who wants like longer term, more continuous, like prosperous careers, they want to appeal to both sides of the party that's currently divided, reunite them under the values which they serve to be able to better push into the future. What does this look like? This looks like not directly opposing Trump, however, propping up like the Republican values that like exist within the policies that Trump is executing, i.e. you have like a Congress, is it Senate that aligns well with the values, aligns well with the concurrent discussions, and aligns well with the current policies that's being used. Note critically, this doesn't just mean note critically, I think the outwards visuals has already been set. I.e. the Republican Party has already caused a series of detriments. This is a critical point where that needs to stop. That image needs an inflection point to which it can bounce off of. That inflection point is a decision of whether you directly oppose the president that which your like party constituents elected to the top, or you decide to like strongly oppose against him. So what benefits do we then get on our side of the house? I think when I'll take your PLI.
Sure, if Trump voters are voting for Trumpism rather than on economic issues or broad Republican policy, why did Trump lose in 2020 but win in 2024? In fact, the most Trumpy Republicans lost at much higher rates in 2022 and in 2024 than the moderate Republicans did.
I think even if you buy those benefits that like these individuals are voting alongside Trump, you just see mitigated impacts on their side of the house, right? They tell you they're able to address a wider array of voters. However, it is unlikely that a Democrat seeing the concurrent state, like that a moderate seeing the concurrent state of the Republican government is going to decide to suddenly swing the other way just because your Congress has decided to oppose the president. I.e., they probably believe that the Congress itself is somewhat at fault for the actions undertaken by the Republican Party leading up to this point, which means you cannot just have an inflection wherein you oppose this idea and say that this wasn't my fault. We push the blame onto Trump and then just take yourselves out of it. We think this is unrealistic and unable to actually garner the votes. I think what critically then occurs is the capacity for individuals to reunite the divided Republican Party. This will serve them not only in the upcoming midterm election, where we're like, just because of historical sways, they might be at like odds of losing, but this signals to the future that you uphold strong Republican values outside of simple support of Trump, that we support you as individuals. You can follow along underneath Trump's cult of personality in the I see you, I hear you campaigns that he's able to garner so much voter support under. You utilize that trait insofar as you're able to then garner back that lost population of votes. what does this look like? This looks like in 6 years, when the next midterm occurs, without Trump in the presidential position, you're way better postured to be able to win the election just because you have like increased gains of individuals from both sides, whereas ostracization occurs when you push away from a population of your voter base. So why do we critically win this round? I think we win this round in the longer time frame when Trump is out of office. And I think simultaneously we win in the shorter term because we're able to better engage the large populace of voters that Trump has in order to gain like for the upcoming midterm election. So proud to oppose.
You know,
Can you all hear me? I'll talk about it. Few thank yous. First, big shout out to Bell. Thank you very much, Bell, for helping the whole UCLA contingent go to this tournament in the first place. And also like getting our like Airbnb changed after it had like bed bugs and whatnot. That was really cool of you. Thank you. We appreciate it a lot. Big shout out to UCLA as well. Thank you very much for showing up. Well, thank you to Claire for agreeing to do this tournament with me. Thanks to my parents, like Jesus as well, I guess. I don't know. Big game man, pretty cool. All right, so yeah, I think with that we'll get started. Thanks. Okay. There are two things House Republicans genuinely care about that are not addressed by Top Hat. Number one, they care about owning the libs. We're going to prove why they do this more on our side of the house. Number two, they probably to some extent care about the state of the economy. They care whether or not their voters can access food, medicine, essential goods, etc. We're going to prove with two simple extensions why we get these things better on our side of the house. First, very important burden opening government critically under-mechanizes. Why will these attempts to oppose Trump actually succeed? They just say Federalist Society opposes this. This is an actual mechanism or explanation that explains why the courts are likely to side with Republicans. There's a few reasons for this. The first is that federal courts are going to be overwhelmingly receptive to their efforts to do this because this is a blatant violation of separation of powers. There's incredibly clear constitutional precedent on this. But secondly, SCOTUS is likely going to vote 5-4 on this because Barrett and Thomas specifically have indicated support for this because they're ideological originalists. They believe in the separation of powers incredibly strongly. They're likely going to support this. This is the critical burden OG misses because it explains why these attempts will succeed in reasserting power over the power of the purse, and it's critical to accessing all of their impact. But the second new impact this gets is that this makes them indispensable to Trump's deliberative and legislative processes in the first place. So this means in status quo, when Trump can just consult with Elon Musk over whatever random programs he's going to cut, they now have to shift and start deliberating with House Republicans. House Republicans finally get a say in which particular programs they have cut. And even if broadly speaking, they're interested in reducing the size of the federal government, which specific programs get cut changes on our side of the house. The major burden I want to prove then is that Republicans have an incentive to not cut as many of the programs as Trump is likely to cut, explaining why then they are going to like be better for the economy, why they probably care about this to some extent for their constituency and also for religious reasons, because let's be honest, many Republicans are evangelicals who care very deeply about issues and probably care to some extent about the poor in the world, even if it doesn't really seem like it a lot of the time. First thing I want to talk about incentives. The first is that many of these programs that Trump has cut are incredibly popular. These are programs that fund people in these districts, fund people in these things. And I want to know the implication here. It's not just that they have a short-term popularity incentive, but they have an ideological incentive to do this. Why? Because not only because they're Christians and evangelicals and care about the poor in their district, but also because they genuinely believe this is the correct path for America. They genuinely believe this is the correct path towards economic growth and salvation. But also there's a donor interest in restoring confidence in the economy. Trump's early term has been disastrous for the economy. It's been disastrous for investor confidence. Stocks have been shellacked as a result of Trump's disastrous economic policies and him asserting power over the purse, destroying investor confidence. Because there's a strong donor side interest to ensure that power over the purse gets restored to the House as quickly as possible, to ensure that House Republicans can continue to maintain and have a check against Trump effectively. Restoring donor confidence is a prerequisite to all of our analysis because let's be honest, for in America, money dominates politics. That is going to be one of the most important incentives you have to restore confidence in these programs. What specific programs are you going to reverse that Elon Musk wants to cut, which is probably the comparative, because Trump would just listen to him anyways because it's critical funding his campaign. Firstly, I think you restore a lot of US aid programs, because initially these programs were created by House Republicans in the first place. PEPFAR literally passed under the Bush administration. The reason why you care about these things is because you care about the global poor. You think you have an obligation, a moral obligation from God in order to do this in the first place. That was Bush's reasoning. These people have been in Congress for 20 or 30 years at a time. They perceive that as a moral obligation. They have to do so. But secondly, by restoring by restoring certain specific targeted welfare, social security programs, etc., restoring programs that fund like federal jobs in primarily Republican districts, you not only directly benefit the constituents in these districts, but you restore investor confidence in the stock market, which is critical to like donor confidence in the first place. But thirdly, by restoring research efforts in technological R&D, you're able to more effectively compete with China on the international stage. And also US aid lets you more effectively compete with China. And let's be honest, every fucking House Republican is a total China hawk, right? Like they want to oppose China as one of their strongest geopolitical interests. And Trump massively threatens your ability to meaningfully challenge China if you're cutting all these programs that are essential to maintaining an effective deterrent against China. So all of this at an impact level explains why House Republicans actually care about these programs beyond the short-termist incentives of one midterm cycle. Because let's be honest, guys, there's a very high chance Republicans just lose the midterms to the thermostatic backlash anyways. But they perceive in the next 2 years they have a critical opportunity to get some number of policies they actually care about passed to shape the direction of the long-term future, to shape the direction of US-China competition. These are things which you only get consulted on our side of the house when you prevent him from like consorting with Elon Musk all the time. Secondly, why do you own the libs? Why do you stop Democrats from mounting an effective resistance effort against Trump? Characterization: the strongest line Democrats have in status quo that will unify the progressive and moderate contingent of the Democratic Party is challenging Trump on process. Because Democrats are divided on policy. They're divided on what should the size of the welfare state be? Should there be a Green New Deal? Should there be Medicare for all, etc.? But they're aligned on process, on seeing Trump as a fascist, on seeing him as an existential threat to democracy. The strongest way that they can show this is if Trump is doing blatantly unconstitutional actions. They can say, hey, Trump is doing certain things which blatantly violate the separation of powers, which blatantly overreach his congressional authority. The problem is when Republicans are the ones to launch this attack, you create a schism in the Democratic Party because the more moderate contingent wants to applaud the Republicans and say, hey, you guys did a really good thing stepping forward here. But the more progressive contingent is like, no, these people are fucking evil, right? Like they're the Republicans, they're our enemies. And you create a deep internal schism within the Democratic Party that prevents them from regrouping around their strongest position around instead of having to talk about actual policy, but being able to talk about the legislative and deliberative processes. Opening opposition.
Schism that you create isn't going to outweigh the like vast bad things that have occurred like on the Republican house.
I think it is for a few reasons. The first is, even if Democrats are like in some sense aligned, the fact that Kamala Harris lost so drastically means Democrats are also at a critical inflection point in the status quo. They need to decide the direction of their party as well. And what this does is it prevents you from creating and consolidating a unified direction of your party in the first place. Because now the moderate and progressive division becomes all the more intractable. You lose the ability to meaningfully unite the progressive basis of your party. You lose the ability to determine whether and to align donor interests with the outer interests of voters. So by Republicans stepping forward in the first place, schisming them both on their strongest legislative issue and preventing Democrats from running that and appealing to their base, but also creating internal divisions within the Democratic Party, you prevent them from regrouping at their most critical juncture, because this is the most critical juncture for the Democrats. This is their worst election in a while, or probably like ever, honestly, compared to how historically bad Trump was as a candidate. So by preventing Democrats from regrouping, you prevent your main rival from reasserting itself and taking advantage of the thermostatic backlash which would otherwise occur. So what this does then is it proves why in the long term, the Republican Party is most interested in not only benefiting their own constituents because the moral obligation they perceive to have to do so, but also confronting their main rivals and owning the libs while you're at it. CG.
Can I need a second to like get used to the volume level? So I guess, can y'all hear me well at this volume?
Okay, if I get too loud, like, let me know, I'll just take it off, and so, like, I'm serious, don't be afraid, like, panel at the very least, be like.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, I'll do pleasantries, very quickly. I think, right, general thank yous, of course, to the University of California, Berkeley for hosting us, the Debate Society, like, hey, this is really cool, this is an amazing opportunity. This is like the beginning of spring break for Yale, so it's like a really great place to start my spring break, and we're having a lot of fun. The motions have been great, so like, very big thank you to the CA team. I think then, like, to my specific thank yous, obviously big man William Barry here is my partner. Wouldn't have made it this far without him, like, no joke, dog straight carries, although hopefully I would speak him this round. Big thanks, of course, to all the other teams in the round, like, great debating so far. Thank you to the amazing members of the Yale Debate Association who are here. Y'all are cool. If my parents see this recording, like, very deep thank you to my parents and to my little brother who's always pushed them to let me do fun extracurriculars like this and like waited for me outside of debate rounds. I think I also just want to make like a general shout out to all Latinos in debate. Like, we're a very small population, but like we're here and we're really proud of ourselves. And yeah, just like Latinos in debate are really cool. I think so, at least. With that being said, like, if I forgot anyone, it's not because like I don't like you, it's just because it's really stressful to be in finals. With all that being said, for POI, it's just like, oh yeah, we do it. Yeah, okay, you know, I do it. Okay, perfect. I think we're going to meaningfully differentiate ourselves in this debate in two ways. First, considering that this motion is not about just congressional Republicans, but House Republicans, and two, actually discussing how House elections work and how providing the key mechanism for how Trump retaliates against you. Okay, first, we're talking about House Republicans. We believe that the Senate is unlikely to move with you for a few reasons. We believe that in general, the Senate Republicans have completely lost it and have completely bent over for Trump. Here's the evidence of why this is true. After Trump literally stormed the Capitol and incited a riot against their government, made them have to go into hiding in their own building while they were trying to do their own job, they refused to impeach him. 4 years later, then when Trump came back, these same Senate Republicans who are supposedly supposed to have high integrity did the same thing and ended up confirming terrible candidates like Hegseth and other loyalists like RFK. What does this end up meaning then? I think in general, we do not trust these Senate Republicans to actually have the spine to stand up to Trump because when he committed literal crimes against the very Constitution of the United States, they did not have the guts to kick them out. What does this mean then for the House Republicans when they break with Trump? When House Republicans end up breaking with Trump, the Senate Republicans end up seeing them as traitors. This means that they're unlikely to work with them in a positive way. I think the basic idea here is that Senate Republicans are actually really happy with Trump. They were the ones that helped him secure Supreme Court nominations that ended up having, I got a text. Okay, ended up securing him the Supreme Court nominations that ended up allowing him to overturn Roe v. Wade, a goal that the Republicans have been fighting for since the 80s. The Senate Republicans have been super committed to Trump. So when you see them betraying them on the fundamental goals they've been fighting for 40 years, I think it's unlikely they're going to work with you in negotiation. How does this negatively impact the House Republicans? I think, yes, we probably still do get Republican policies passed, but this means that Senate Republicans are way less likely to grant the specific concessions to House Republicans that would actually help their districts. By being informed in specific districts and not states, House Republicans have really strong incentives to help their specific communities back home. This is what helps them get reelected. This is the opening government argument. The Senate stops you from doing that when they don't want to work with you because they feel like traitors. This policy retaliation meaningfully stops you because we believe that if you're a longtime Republican and you're still in the House, it's because you have a strong commitment to your district. If you can't do your job for them, you end up suffering. Okay, now to the main argument. I think this is where we're going to cleanly take it over opening opposition. I think we have to go through a few history lessons and demographic lessons about how the United States House work. First thing to understand is that most House races are uncontested. 2 reasons. First, because of gerrymandering. The people that determine what the districts are going to be in your state are the people who are in charge of your state. If your state is majority Republican, they're going to draw the districts so that it's basically impossible for Democrats to win in the vast majority of districts. This ends up meaning then that the vast majority of states in the, so another reason why these seats are uncontested is that in these gerrymandered districts, since political parties do not think they can overturn these districts, Democrats don't think they're going to turn the gerrymandered Republican districts, they just give up on running candidates there. What then ends up happening in these districts? First, I think this meaningfully impacts our round because it means that the risk in today's round is not the risk that the opening side talked about. It's not about you losing your seat to Democrats. It's about you losing your seat to different Republicans. Here is why. We believe that, thanks, I guess. We believe that the greatest number of representatives that are Republicans are in these uncontested districts, and this is the greatest risk. Now, what happens in a place where there is an uncontested seat? The person that ends up winning that uncontested seat is the person who wins the Republican primary. This is where my POI came up. I think the opening government team, unfortunately, just completely mishandles how primaries work. The people that show up to primaries are ultra committed partisans because they're the only ones that actually care enough. I think the only people that get mobilized to go to like these small party elections in their small town at the primary level are the people who are super committed to politics and the people that super care. Everyone in this round agrees that Trump has created a MAGA cult of personality that is able to mobilize super large numbers of people. Insofar as we believe that the primaries are the key to winning the seats, we believe that Trump is super able to mobilize MAGA Republicans who are the only ones that actually care enough to go to their local primaries and kick you out. Now, let's just take a look at the history, right? This is how Trump has taken advantage of his last 8 years, since 2016. Yeah, that's like around the right number, right? The last several years that he's been involved in politics to completely turn the House Republicans into a group of people that would completely bend over backwards for him. Because what he's done is he's gone district by district and taken those Republicans in the House that have been brave enough to speak out against him and said, we're calling the MAGA group and you're going out. Here's then why we believe that this is likely. Yeah, so then here's what we believe, that this is likely to happen for a large group of Republicans, and why even if you act in numbers, you're unlikely to be safe. First, that it's early enough right now in Trump's turn for him to start organizing to kick you out. Insofar as we see that Trump has a behavior of being super sensitive and being very offended anytime anyone attacks him and going on a Twitter storm anytime somebody says something negative on him, I would not be surprised if he had the time to say, hey, all these congressional Republicans are terrible right now, go on his X Twitter storm, and then within the next 2 years, create a plan to strategically kick all of you out of your seats, which I think you don't want to do again because you have a major commitment to your district. I think even though, additionally, right, even if he doesn't get you in the first 2 years, Trump has been involved in politics enough that, not yet. Yeah, sure.
Sure. The House is much more conservative than the Senate because they need to win elections in hyper-rural R+30 districts, whereas senators need to win more moderate statewide races. House Republicans also capitulated to Trump after the insurrection. The only reason he was impeached there is because Democrats controlled the House after the 2018 midterm.
I guess that's responsive to the stuff earlier. I think Senates are still the senators are still unlikely to work with you, but again, not me. I think, right, Trump has still been substantially powerful enough in politics right now, and it seems like his culture war stuff is strong enough that his successor, JD Vance, is likely to still have a ton of influence in politics. Once Trump retires from politics, he's still likely to have a massive cult of personality around himself, which means that even if he doesn't get you in this election, he can get you in the next one. And that's super easy because you have elections every 2 years. You're really scared of this happening as a Republican in the House. So here's the first risk that I think we mechanize much better than the opening opposition team. You lose your job to someone who's more loyal to Trump. Here's why you don't want this to happen. One, you want a job. You probably dedicated a lot of time to setting up a life in Washington, D.C. This is your main source of income. You really like the money you get from lobbying. It gives you a really good opportunity to probably have a lot of social mobility for your family. I feel like most people like their jobs, right? This is an unreasonable impact. I think you losing your job really sucks, and it's something that you don't want to do. I think the other thing that ends up being really harmful when these more loyal Republicans take your seats in these local elections is that you can't pass policies that are specific to your state. Even if Trump is in power, and even if Trump does power grabs, you still, as the House, still pass laws, and you can still incorporate the things that help your specific district as a Republican. But if you all end up losing your jobs, or a very large number of you end up losing your jobs because Trump feels that you have fundamentally attacked him, it means you end up being hurt. I think additionally, though, this likely increases the risk that Trump retaliates at a policy level. Even if you don't all lose your job, Trump now understands that the House Republicans are very hostile to him, which means that he's likely trying to control you into doing things by blocking laws that you want to pass, saying if you let in this House provision, I'm not going to let you pass this policy, which means that your impact and your ability to actually do politics well completely goes away because Trump retaliates at the policy level. You cannot do your job in the case you have it, and if you lose it, you're out of the job. Could not be proud.
All right, I want to start with some thank yous. First, Thanks a lot to Berkeley for just hosting an amazing tournament. It's been a lot of fun and I'm super glad we could. Also, thank you, of course, to like everyone who debated at this tournament, especially the amazing teams in finals. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks to Will for debating with me and Belle for helping make that happen. And of course, thank you to the entire Stanford Debate Society, all my teammates and coaches. I love you all so much, all the friends I've made through the activity, and of course, my family. I was actually successful in reinstating power of the purse, which probably matters more than anything else in the round. I want to know, OG wants you to think that this is derivative, but it's not my fault that they didn't mechanize why they're successful in restoring power of the purse and why that means more money goes to initiatives that matter to House Republicans. Will fills these gaps. Firstly, he proves why resistance through lawsuits is likely successful because courts are likely to rule in favor of the courts, especially the Supreme Court, who is likely to be the determiner and whether or not this power goes back to Congress. Secondly, he then proves why Congress Republicans are likely to reinstate funding for critical initiatives that Trump has cut and that Elon has an incentive to cut, explaining the difference in incentives between Trump and Elon and the House Republicans in power. And lastly, he proves an impact to benefiting the economy and looking hard on China, explaining why House Republicans care about these things. These are policies that matter to them. OG doesn't do this. This is already winning the round. Why? Because I just want to weigh this over all impacts to elections, which are pretty much the only other impacts any team in this round wants to talk about. Like the election outcome might be a big change for the interests of specific House Republicans, but even those specific House Republicans who might lose the election probably still also do care about other things like the economy, the things we talk about impact everyone. But I want to note that like their impacts just don't affect the vast majority of House Republicans. Everyone agrees that there are a lot of constituencies where incumbents are either likely to win on the other side because of gerrymandering, etc. Realistically, nothing is going to change for the vast majority of them if you care about elections alone. In contrast, our argument on policy success is in the interest of the House Republicans as a collective entity, far outweighing on scope, because it's something every single one of them cares about, even if the delta on elections is only in like 3 districts, right? They care about the ability to exercise their power as elected officials. They care about their ability to spend on things that protect the US economy, etc. But also, even if you think that elections matter more, if you think that our argument actually like impacts out to an impact on the economy, an impact on looking hard on China, etc., this affects election outcomes more than anything else, because Seamus himself concedes that oftentimes inflation in the current economic situation is what matters more to voters than anything else. What this means is that if we can actually reinstate power of the purse and get money back, get people their jobs back, make the economy look better, etc., we're just more likely to see the House Republicans win their elections because they are the incumbents, because they look good from the economy being strong. And lastly, I think that their policy record also affects their ability to do things like win future elections and get future jobs. It's not specific to the current midterms. It's about their general career. For all of these reasons, we are winning that this is successful. This already beats every other team in the round. But now let's talk about why we're also winning the point on elections. The OG mechanism here is distancing yourself from Trump looks good. The problem is that Democrats and moderates are still likely to vote against you if there is a strong Democratic candidate in the district in which you're in. Our will extension on Democratic resurgence uniquely proves why on government, when the Republicans do this, we are able to stop the Democratic Party from reunifying and becoming stronger at using this like arguments against Trump's process as like a pushing point for party unity. Why does it outweigh OG? It's just a way stronger link in the most critical cases, because I want to know that a lot of the impacts are contingent on the overall makeup of the House as a whole, which means that they are contingent on these specific purple constituencies in which there's a Republican candidate against the Democratic candidate. Our argument is just much stronger in these cases because they don't prove why the Democrats and moderates are likely to just vote for the Democratic candidate either way. We structurally explain why the Democratic candidate is likely to look worse when the Democratic Party as a whole looks worse and is unable to find the points of unity to fight against the Republicans. But also, we also apply to all elections, not just these midterms, including the 2028 presidential election, where we're enacting out to Democratic unity as a whole and not just to specific Republicans in the midterm elections. If you care about impacts to elections, you're probably also voting CG. highlight this speaks the mechanism on elections, because even if you isolate some MAGA and extreme Republicans, they'd still vote for you over a Democratic candidate if they turn out. So this doesn't have a substantial impact on these swing constituencies. In contrast, we explain well, you just weaken the Democratic candidate, which makes it far easier to get the votes of moderates and Democrats. At that point, we're also winning the clash on elections. When you make it harder for Democrats to have party unity, you make it harder for them to win any election. This is in the interest of House Republicans as well, although it's probably less important than impacts to policy success, as I already talked about. Before I move on, I'm happy to take a point.
We tell you that party unity for the Republican Party is weakened under your side of the House. How does this compare with the Democrats also being split?
We think that the effect for Democrats is more significant at the point where the Democrats have just been struggling for so long to even find a point of unity. The Democrats have more diverging views on policy, more diverging views on economic policy, for example. I think Will mechanizes a lot of this. And what this means is that you're just less likely to be able to find a candidate. Also, Republicans right now have the benefits of being incumbents. Even if Trump can't win again, this gives them an advantage in the next election, which means even if you think this is symmetric, it's probably still more of a harm for the Democrats. Cool. Let's do a little bit more rebuttal to CO. What do we get? What do we get out of CO? Firstly, on this idea that the Senate is unlikely to help you, I want to know, firstly, they don't prove why Senate help is necessarily super important. The House Republicans alone can bring this to the Supreme Court, can get power of the purse back. But on this idea that the Senate Republicans are just going to actively work against you on your policy agenda, I just don't think they do enough analytical legwork to actually prove this. Even if they weren't willing to vote to impeach Trump, I still think that they're not hardcore Trump loyalists on every issue. That is, if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the House Republicans, they're not going to stir the pot more by being no, we actually think Trump should take away our congressional powers. They're still likely to support that. They're not likely to not take a strong stance for either side, but they're not going to sabotage their party on policy. On the idea of on the arguments that they talk about on elections, they say most races are heavily gerrymandered, but even if this is true, there are enough close districts for the House to flip. This is literally empirically proven by the fact that different parties can win the House, which also explains why our arguments are going to outweigh. On the idea of primaries, I think some like the stance, others won't. It's unclear if the OG or the CO mech wins out here. But what I think is more important then is who actually wins the actual election to determine who goes to Congress. We are winning that mechanism in elections, but more importantly, we are explaining why restoring power of the purse to Congress uniquely actually does happen on our side and is the most important impact in the ground, hugely important for House Republicans. Practice demonstration.
Should that be the final seat of Berkeley AW?
Good, people can hear me? Okay. Yeah, for some pleasantries, thank you to Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. That's not a joke, actually. I would not be behind this podium if not for him. Thank you to Fefe, you've been an amazing partner of this tournament. Have taught me a lot about debate, and the YDA, everyone on this trip, you're an incredible community. I love you all.
We love you, Barry.
Thank you, Sonal.
I love you too, Barry.
And yeah, thank you to my parents, everyone who's also supported me and helped me in my debate career. Thank you, and to Berkeley for running an amazing tournament. All right. And with that, let's start by taking CG out of the round. First on their second extension. While Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk might care about owning the libs, random House Republicans that the vast majority of Americans haven't heard of and don't get a minute of screen time on the news probably don't. We think they often have to work with people who are on the left. They have to work in order to pass bipartisan legislature, and they're not scrutinized on Fox News on a daily basis if you're randomly from Nebraska and aren't a very important and perceptually in the news kind of representative. So we don't think this is actually something that that matters to you very much as an actor. Let's start by talking then about how courts are going to be receptive and how you're actually going to give the power of the purse back to Congress. No, we think a lot of these courts are likely to be appealed a number of times. They're likely to go up to be levels like right below the Supreme Court. We think lots of these justices were put in place by Trump, who have incentives to be loyal to him. And it's not going to be as easy as OG says. And even if they get a slight margin on this, away while we're definitely ahead later. But even if they're right and like it gets all the way up to SCOTUS and they overturn it, realize that they just care much more about re-election because we think the average Republican in the House is like not ideological, right? They care about helping their communities and like being politicians and like doing interesting things on their committees, and because it's just more proximate to their quality of life, and it's just like the general preference of politicians. Then on the economy and talking about donors, we realize that donors and their ability to donate to members of House is not a function of how well the stock market is going. Two warrants for this. First, we think super PACs are pretty diversified in the amount of money that they get from different resources. And second, we think that like they fundraise from like lots of like institutions and rich people who have lots of money, regardless of how the stock market is going. So they're very silly link about how like the stock market is going to like make all like House Republicans lose their funding. It's just like very implausible. So we think like the amount of money going to campaigns is probably just like symmetric, and because of that, they're not getting any of their impacts about how you're going to have better welfare programs. And also they don't very well mechanize why this money is likely to be spent very effectively and on the kinds of programs that they talk about. At best, it's just that they could, but the amount of money is like symmetric either way. Not right now. Then also just briefly on like the other turning the lips argument, realize we just completely like turn this argument because you further don't, it doesn't look like that you're fracturing the Democratic Party like they say. No, instead it looks like you're a traitor both A, to Trump and the high executives within the Republican Party, but also to like the general electorate. We think that the average person who is like not following politics very closely in America, instead if they happen to be voting during midterms, they're going to look, oh, are you like doing like what I like in my party, or are you like doing something else? And like allying the enemy we think is very likely to alienate both people who are on the margin and those who are deeply entrenched in Republican ideology. Let's go then to the responses on our extension, which are extremely liked, by the way. The only real response is like, the Senate cooperation is not important. It is pretty important because we need the Senate in order to, pass laws and pass policies. And like the House needs to negotiate with the Senate in order to get things like super majorities in the Senate so they can actually go into the Oval Office. They also just ignore that our extension is comparative, which is that it's not that the Senate is just like this puppet of Trump's like desires. Instead, it's like they're more aligned with Trump than the House is. And the implication of that is they see you as a traitor because your like legislature is not dealing with Trump in the same ways that they are. So the few layers of mitigation they give on this just doesn't deal with the comparative nature of our argument. But let's do the weighing and knock them out here, because they talk about elections and then they're like extension about success. First, we just outweigh on the incentives to just weigh greater scope. We think that the ability to get reelected is the most proximate impact to what you care about as a congressperson, but also their argument is just so much of a higher burden. They have to show that there's going to be lots of successful lawsuits and then that's going to affect people's voting behavior. All we have to show is that Trump is going to get pissed off at the fact that you spoke out against him. And we'll talk about in a minute why it's very, very likely that Trump is going to call you out for these things, because it's like very like sensitive to these sorts of things and is likely to like talk about you on Twitter. And then people on Fox News are going to like see, oh yes, like Trump is like maligning this person, I'm not going to vote for them. We think that like this incentive structure is just much more entrenched and it's just a much lower burden argument and it's just much more likely. Also, we just outweigh this on time frame because our impact triggers first, so we're never going to be able to get to theirs. We think when people go to the voting office, they're going to like watch Fox News and see what Trump says about all of the like people who like have betrayed him in Congress, and you're not likely to vote for those people. You'll vote for some other like Republican that is like going to be in your district. Why then do we take it over OG?
Yeah,
the first clear reason, sure.
Yeah, if Will's right, the Supreme Court is going to strike down economy regardless. What House Republicans do doesn't matter for whether or not they get to implement policy powers of course. Only electoral arguments have a delta, and the average length of the House term is over a decade. If House Republicans make it through this one tough backlash midterm, they can have a long political career. And
These are like good reasons about why the CG extension doesn't make a lot of sense, because we think we can also like outweigh on electoral outcomes. Like, yeah, if that's symmetric, then like we agree. But in just a second, we're going to address you and why we win on all this stuff about like the election. First, we just better contextualize and apply their own framing about re-election and like passing policies. They say Trump has no incentive to bully House Republicans. This is nonsense. He's empirically very sensitive to literally any call out against his being or character. He'll go on like rants and have these personal attacks on others and Twitter. He'll like name them. And we think that people are unlikely to follow the like how policies are being followed through Congress, but they are likely to like read Twitter, and that's more proximate to how they're going to like change their voting patterns. Then they kind of push back by saying only older people will vote. This is not responsive to the analysis we give you in our extension, which is like, yes, older people are the people who are least likely to be engaged in the nuances of politics. They're likely just to watch Fox News or Breitbart, which are very likely to show like Trump messaging to a much greater extent, including like calling you a traitor for like calling out against them. So our MEC works even if all of their framing about this are right. They say that Trump doesn't want to lose. Realize that there's like tons of sellout Republicans that also want to win. It's very likely that if one person betrays like Trump in the district, there'll be some other Republican which says, yes, Trump endorsed me, and then like I won't betray you in the Senate. We think this is like incredibly likely to happen. So the idea that Trump won't do this at all because he doesn't want to lose, it's very easy that he's going to win. Again, the way on this argument is really easy because Trump, all he has to do is be bad and want vengeance, and instead as opposed to just like stop caring about his like the way people talk about him, which is like clearly never going to happen. The only other pushback we get from them is that they say it's like unpopular. Just weigh this argument pretty simply. If their incentive level analysis is true, it's just way worse that Trump has it out for you in the ways that can hurt you the very most. Because if you're unable to pass policy because the Senate is blocking you, then you're also unable to pass policy because Trump is like going to sign more executive orders and do more kinds of executive action because he doesn't trust the House. He doesn't trust the legislature anymore to do the kinds of things you're doing. So if anything, if you as a House representative go out and speak against him, you're incentivizing Trump to do even more kinds of executive actions. They trust you even less. So that's just another turn in another explanation as to why we just cleanly outweigh all of the analysis and stuff they give on Trump. Very briefly about why we're ahead on our low. One, we analyze relevant actors in a sensible way, i.e. Trump and the Senate. Their MECs are only contextual to members of the House and voters. We like do these things. The only MECs they give you is like Trump will punish you and you'll lose your voter base. We tell you he pressures the Senate. We tell you he's very sensitive to these things. We tell you how he punishes you in the ways that you care about the most. But even if you buy their MECs, we terminalize and explain those impacts better about why you care about policy, why policy gets worse, and why you're terrible as a congressperson. Proud to oppose.